Good evening, and welcome to AJP's Northeast Asia market close. Korea bounced today, but the bounce was led from the back of the chip supply chain, not the front. Here is the through line that connects all three markets tonight. Korea and Japan, the two markets that live and die by semiconductors, both rose on a relief bounce in chips. But in both, it was the equipment makers and the suppliers that led, not the marquee memory and artificial intelligence names everyone watches. In Seoul, the chip substrate makers outran SK Hynix. In Tokyo, the equipment giant Tokyo Electron outran SoftBank. The headline was a chip rebound. The leadership was one layer down in the picks and shovels. And then there is China, which set the whole thing out. Shanghai closed barely changed, trading its own quiet domestic book, with even its big power grid names slightly lower. One chip bounce, two markets chasing it from the supply chain up, and a third that simply watched. The KOSPI closed up more than 1%, around 8,490. But the index move is not the real story. The money flow is. Foreign investors dumped roughly 2.7 trillion won of Korean stock today, extending a long selling streak. The entire rally was built on institutions, who bought almost 2.7 trillion won and single-handedly held the market up. Retail investors were roughly flat. So this was a green screen powered by one buyer against a foreign exodus. Underneath, the leadership was telling. Samsung Electro-Mechanics jumped nearly 8% to around 2,196,000 won, or about $1,418, leading the entire electronics equipment sector. This is the chip substrate maker, the hidden bottleneck in the artificial intelligence hardware chain, and today it outran everything. Samsung Electronics rose about 4% to around 336,000 won, roughly $217, a solid move for the mega cap. But SK Hynix, the high bandwidth memory champion that has been the face of this year's rally, managed less than 1%, closing around 2,650,000 won, about $1,712. The supplier and the broad mega cap beat the memory star. On a bounce day, that is an unusual signature, and it tells you this was about the supply chain re-rating, not a clean return of conviction in the memory trade itself. China was the odd market out, and deliberately so. The Shanghai composite closed up just a fraction, around 4,086, essentially flat. There was no chip euphoria here, because Shanghai's main board is not a chip index. It trades domestic policy, metals, and the power grid build-out. And here is the revealing detail. The big story in China this year has been the electricity supercycle. The idea that artificial intelligence runs out of power before it runs out of chips, driving a multi-year grid equipment boom. You might expect Korea's power gear surge to echo straight into China's grid names. It did not. The grid leaders all drifted slightly lower today. Nadi Technology, the grid automation champion, eased to around 22.85 yuan. TBEA, the country's largest transformer maker, slipped to around 22.41 yuan. China XD Electric, the high voltage equipment heavyweight, edged down to around 14.9 yuan. The grid trade that powered Korea's electrical equipment rally simply did not fire in Shanghai today. China stayed in its own lane, quiet, slightly positive, and unmoved by the chip drama next door. Japan told the same story as Korea, and it rhymed almost perfectly. The Nikkei 225 closed up nearly 1%, around 70,062, recovering after a brutal stretch of selling in chip and artificial intelligence names. And just like Seoul, the equipment maker led, not the marquee name. Tokyo Electron, the semiconductor equipment giant, rose more than 3% to around 77,150 yen, the standout. Advantest, the chip testing leader, added about 1% to around 32,340 yen. And SoftBank, the artificial intelligence investment conglomerate that has whipsawed this market all month on its OpenAI exposure, managed just over 1%, to around 5,963 yen. So in Tokyo as in Seoul, the picks and shovels names the equipment, the testers outpaced the famous bets on artificial intelligence itself. The same fingerprint in two different markets on the same day. So today was a relief bounce in chips, but a particular kind. The leadership came from the supply chain and the equipment makers, not from the memory and artificial intelligence superstars that have driven this year. That can mean smart money is rotating toward the more durable part of the chain, or it can mean the conviction in the headline names just is not back yet. And in Korea, with foreigners still selling billions while institutions alone hold up the tape, the honest question is whether a one-buyer rally can last. We will be back tomorrow to see whether the chip leaders join the bounce, or whether the foreign selling finally drags Korea back down. Until then, subscribe to AJP for your daily Northeast Asia market close. Thank you for watching AJP.